Good morning, students. Welcome back to another Waidsum Academy video. Today we're going to be learning about chapter 17, Reproduction in Humans. In this chapter, we'll talk about the male and female reproductive system and how fertilization occurs in humans. And we're going to also learn about puberty, what is puberty and how does it affect humans, and fertilization and development. So let's begin. Now we're going to start with section 17.1, the male and female reproductive systems. In this section, we're going to learn about the the functions of the parts of the male reproductive system and the functions of the part of the female reproductive system, and we're going to explain the adaptive features of egg cells and the adaptive features of sperm cells, and we're also going to compare the male and female gametes. Now, like many animals in this system, humans reproduce through sexual reproduction. You've learned that in sexual reproduction involves between the fusion of male gametes and a female gamete to form a zygote. The gametes are produced in the reproductive system. Now we're going to the male reproductive system. Now various parts of the human reproductive system are shown in this diagram, and note that the male reproductive system is closely associated to the urinary system. So the urinary system and the male reproductive system are very closely associated. Now here are some parts: the kidneys, ureter, urinary bladder, the sperm duct, prostate gland, urethra, penis, and testes. Now many of these organs here are also in the urinary system, the wastage system, and they both help in the functions of fertilization. Now I'm going to explain which one. It's going to click on which one and what they explain. Starting with the testes. The testes are part of the reproductive system. There are two testes, and each testis produces a sperm. Each testis also produces the male sex hormones such as testosterone. The male hormones are responsible for the development and maintenance of the secondary sexual characters in males. So the testes, which there are two, are in between the penis, and their main roles are to help development in maintenance of the secondary sexual characteristics in males. That is in height, sperm, height, and enlargement in height, and also deeper voices. Now this is the front view of the male reproductive system. Here we have the side view. You have the pubic bone, which is a bone right in between in the front of the urinary bladder. We have the anus, we have the prostate gland, rectum, testis, and scrotum. Now the scrotum is right next to the testis. The testes lie in between the thighs, and both testes are like pouch-like sac called the scrotum or scrotal sac. The scrotum is located right outside the body cavity, thus is at the slightly lower temperature than the body temperature. Yeah, that means that the scrotum is much colder than the rest of the body temperature. The lower temperature is needed for the sperm to develop properly. So sperm cells are the cells created by the male reproductive system, and to do so, one of the factors needed is lower temperature. So to create sperms, the scrotum needs to be in a lower temperature compared to the rest of the body to produce sperm cells properly, to develop sperm cells properly. Now let's talk about the sperm duct, which is right over here. The sperm duct. The sperm duct is a duct that is connected from the urinary bladder. No, from it's connected from the testis. It's connecting both testes, and in between the the gland, in between the duct, there is the prostate gland and the urethra. Now, what does the sperm duct do? Each sperm duct loops over a urethra and then opens into the urethra. It loops around a urethra. Let me spell it for you. U-R-E-T-E-R. Yes. So a sperm duct loops around a urethra, which is this. This is the ureter. The ureter connects the kidneys to the urinary gland. This is the ureter. It loops around the ureter and then opens into the urethra. It opens to the urethra. That means the sperm duct and the urethra are connected at this junction. Over here, the urethra and the sperm duct are connected. Now the sperm duct carries the sperm created by the testis, and the sperms travel through the sperm duct and travel all the way to the urethra. It's here where the penis, the sperm lies inside the penis. So during fertilization, this penis travels to the female vagina. So this is where the sperm travels through. It travels through the sperm duct. Now, if you notice, there are some glands in the male reproductive system. What do the glands do? The prostate gland is at the base of the urinary bladder. It's right below the urinary bladder, and where two sperm ducts join the urethra. The prostate gland secretes a fluid which mixes with the sperm. This fluid contains the nutrients and enzymes that nourishes the sperm cells and stimulate them to swim actively. The mixture of the fluid and sperm is called semen. So what does prostate gland do? It produces a fluid that mixes with the sperm cell. Now this fluid contains nutrients that the sperm cell needs to swim faster and to grow larger. It nourishes the sperm cell, and the mixture of the sperm cell and the fluid that the prostate gland produces is called semen. Let me spell it right here. S-E-N-E-N. This mixture is called semen, and it's the mixture of both the sperm cells. Give me a second. It's the mixture of both the sperm cells and the fluid that prostate glands produce. Now let's move on finally to the urethra. This is the urethra. This long tube that connects the sperm duct and the urinary bladder. The urethra is a tube that passes from the bladder to the center of the penis to the outside of the body. Both semen and urine pass out of the body through the urethra. So remember when we said that the male reproductive system and the urinary system are closely associated? It's through the urethra. Because what does the urinary bladder hold? The urinary bladder holds urine, and the urine passes through the urine passes through the urethra to leave outside through the penis. It passes through the urethra, through the penis, and it comes out. And same goes for the sperm cells. When the semen is created, it passes through the urethra out of the penis during fertilization. So this urethra is one of the parts that connects the male reproductive system, and the urinary system. Now let's talk about the penis. Right here. The penis is an erectile organ. It enters the vagina during the fertilization to deposit sperm, which contains sperm. So during fertilization, the penis enters the female vagina and releases the semen, which contains the sperm needed to create a zygote. And now finally, let's talk about the sperms themselves. The sperm are an important part of the male reproductive system. They is what contain the male gametes. The sperm is the male gamete anyways. The sperm is the male gamete. Numerous of sperm are produced throughout the life of a male human, and when he becomes physically mature, a sperm is about 60 nanometers long. So the sperm is the male gamete, and it's needed during the fertilization to produce the zygote. And now this sperm is created, numerous of them are created throughout the life of a male. And as they become mature or older, they slowly become bigger, and reaching about 60 nanometers. And now let's talk about the parts of the sperm. Now a sperm is a type of cell, and it contains of the nucleus, cytoplasm, and some few other parts that helps it do its functions. Now the sperm is split into three pieces: the head, the middle piece, and the tail. Now the head is about 2.5 nanometers wide. It contains the large, inert, very large nucleus with a small amount of cytoplasm. The nucleus carries the haplo set of chromosomes, and an acrosome is also present. This acrosome is a vesicle containing enzymes. These enzymes break down the part of the egg's membranes. Now, what they're trying to say is, during fertilization, when the sperm cell reaches the egg, which is known as the female gamete, when the sperm cells arrive, this acrosome is in charge. Is a vesicle that contains enzymes. Now these enzymes are in charge of breaking down the egg's membrane to allow it to penetrate the egg during fertilization. Now let's talk about the middle piece. The middle piece contains numerous of mitochondria. The mitochondria, if you haven't knew yet from the cells we've learned, mitochondria provides energy for cells. So in this case, it provides energy for the sperm to swim towards the egg. The egg travels through the sperm duct from the it's created in the testis, moves to the sperm duct, then goes to the urethra, as I've explained before. It moves it's created from the testis. It's created in the testis, moves to the sperm duct, then from there on, it travels to the urethra, which arrives at the urethra, which arrives at the penis. And then from there, it leaves the male and enters the female vagina. Let's move on, since now we've understand, this is the movement of the sperm from the testis. This is something you should memorize, and it will come to your exam. So the testis sperm duct, urethra, and outside. Now let's move on to the tail. The tail creates is if you the tail is obviously known for giving the sperm cell the ability to move. It's beating movement. It moves like it's beating. Have you ever beaten an egg? The sperm cell moves like it's beating. So it moves aggressively, very fast. The beating movement of a tail, which is known as flagellum, enables the sperm to swim towards the egg. So the beating movement of the tail is known as, let me type it, flagellum. This is known as the movement. This is known as the movement of the tail. It makes the tail give the ability to move on its own, making it motile. Now let's go to the female reproductive system. Now we're going to talk, now that we've understand the male reproductive system, we've learned about the testes, scrotum, sperm duct, and the production of sperms. Let's talk about the female reproductive system. Now in the female just like the male reproductive system, in the female reproductive system, the female reproductive system is very closely associated to the urinary system, but it's quite different compared to the male reproductive system, because just like the plant reproduction system, a female also contains an ovary and an oviduct. This allows the female reproductive system to create eggs. Now the ovary. Now I'm going to explain each of the functions of all these that help build the female reproductive system. Starting with the ovary. Now the ovary, there's two of them. This is the ovary. Sorry, that's a bit laggy. This is the ovary. The ovary is the egg. And just like the testes, there's two of them. There's two ovaries in the female reproductive system. And each ovary produces hormones such as estrogen and progesterone. Now these hormones are responsible for the development and maintenance of the secondary sexual characteristics in females, which is enlargement of hip size and breast size, and also the menstruation cycle begins. It enables the menstruation cycle. This is our features in puberty, which we'll talk about later on in this video. Now, these eggs, when they become more mature, they release the ovaries. And now let's talk about the oviduct. The oviduct is what connects the ovary to the utera. The oviduct, when the ovary releases ovaries, the ovaries travel through the oviduct, or what is also known as fallopian tube. Now each oviduct is a narrow muscular tube leading from the ovary to the uterus, and it has a funnel-like opening lying close to the ovary. This funnel, it's a type of funnel-like opening. Now, this makes it easier for the egg to enter the oviduct. And the inner surface of the oviduct is lined with cilia. The action of the cilia helps move the egg along the oviduct. That means the cilia helps the ovaries, which is the egg to move through the oviduct. and the egg is usually fertilized in the oviduct. So what I've just explained, is that when the ovary is fertilized, it travels through the oviduct. To do this, the oviduct has a funnel-like opening, and in the inner walls of the oviduct, it's created by filler, and this helps the egg move along the oviduct. Now let's talk about the uterus. The uterus is this entire part. This entire funnel-like shaped part is the uterus. Now what does the uterus do? The uterus, plural uteri, or womb, is where the fetus, or unborn baby is developed during pregnancy. That means this is where after fertilization occurs, this is where the baby develops. So in pregnancy, the babies are created are developed in the uterus. The uterus is shaped like an upside down pear. I don't really see it. To me, it's shaped more like a funnel. But according to this book, it says that the uterus is shaped like an upside down pear. It has elastic muscular walls that can enlarge. The smooth muscles tissue in the walls of the uterus contact to push the fetus out during the birth. So the uterus is created with elastic muscular walls that can enlarge during pregnancy, and the smooth muscle tissue in the walls of the uterus contact to push the fetus out during birth. The soft, smooth inner lining of the uterus is called the uterus lining or endometrium, which is the uterus lining or endometrium. This is the uterus lining. Not this part, not this part. This entire part, not this part, this part. This entire part is called the uterus lining. Now that we've learned from here, let's move to the side profile. Here's the side profile. You notice how the female reproductive system also has a public bone, just like the male reproductive system. Now, continuing on, let's talk about the cervix. The cervix is right here. Now, what is the cervix and what does it do? The cervix, which is also in here, here's the cervix. The cervix is the lower proportion of the uterus where it joins with the vagina. Here's the vagina. This entire part is the vagina. Now, it's the opening of the cervix that allows menstrual blood to flow out into the vagina during menstruation. So during menstruation, which is after one has hit puberty, the cervix opens up the uterus to allow blood to flow out through the vagina, allow menstrual blood to flow out through the vagina. So it opens and closes. It's what allows the menstrual blood to flow out through the vagina during menstruation. Now let's talk about the vagina itself. The vagina, or the birth canal, it leads from the cervix to the outside. Now it's here where the semen is deposited. It's here where the penis puts the semen and is deposited into the vagina during fertilization, during mating or sexual intercourse. So, and it's also what is the vagina is what leads out to the opening, the outside. Now that we've learned from that, from both the front view and side view, let's talk about the ovum. Now the ovum is a cell, which is also the female gamete. As we know that the sperm is the male gamete, the ovum is the female gamete of the female reproductive system. And a female gamete is born with all the potential eggs that she will ever have. At birth, about 70 potential egg cells are already presented in the ovaries. However, only about 500 will ever become mature within the two ovaries. Usually, only one mature egg is released every month. This happens from the time a female becomes physically mature until the age about 45 to 55 years of age. So that means that the ovaries are limited. They're not unlimited like the sperm cells. Sperm cells are unlimited, but ovaries are not. And when a female hits around 45 to 55, she will be unable to create the ovum or an egg, which is the female gamete. At age 40 to 55, the female and from the moment a lady hits puberty and becomes physically mature, the egg cells start to produce. Until the age of 45 to 55, the egg cells stop producing, unallowing the girl to hit fertilization. Now let's talk about the parts of the egg cell. Just like the sperm cell, it consists of cytoplasm, nucleus, and mitochondria. But unlike the sperm cell, it contains of a cell membrane and an outer membrane, which is also known as a jelly coat. Now, the cytoplasm, which contains small amount of yolk, the yolk acts as an energy store after fertilization occurs. And so the egg is surrounded by a cell membrane, which is in turn is surrounded by an outer membrane or a jelly coat, and the outer membrane changes during fertilization. Now, it is this membrane that is broken down by the sperm enzymes located in the acrosome, located in the acrosome. Now, it's what these enzymes break to allow the sperm to enter the egg cell, enter the ovum. Now that we've understand this, let's go on to learn about the differences between a male and a female gamete. The difference between male and female gametes. Now, what is the difference? Now, we know that the male gamete is known as the sperm, and the female gamete is known as the ovum. Now, the male gamete has a head, a middle piece, and a tail, but the female gamete is spherical in shape. It's an egg, so that means it's circle. While a sperm cell, it has more of a head piece, a middle piece, and a tail piece. Now, the difference between these two is that the nucleus contains either the X or Y chromosome in the sperm cell, while in the female gamete, the cell only contains X chromosomes. These are chromosomes codes for the creation of an unborn child. It will help create the gender of an unborn child that can be produced. Now, the sperm cell is around 60 nanometer long, with a head that has a diameter of 2.5 nanometers long. But for a female gamete, it's very much bigger, around double the size of a sperm cell. Now, the sperm cell has the ability to move. The tail of a sperm cell gives the sperm cell the ability to move. However, the female gamete is not movable. It travels through it doesn't travel at all. The passive movement of the egg along the oviduct is due to the action of the cilia. It does not move at all. It's the cilia that helps the female gamete, which is the ovum. It's the cilia that helps the ovum travel along the oviduct and the peristalsis of the oviduct wall. But unlike the female gamete, the male gamete, which is the sperm cell, has a tail that enables it to swim towards the oviduct. Now, numerous sperms are produced throughout life from puberty onwards. That means that the sperm cells of a male is unlimited. At the moment a male hits puberty, the amount of sperm cells are created. So it's unlimited for the male. And a large number of sperm is released per ejaculation, yes. So during the sexual intercourse, the penis releases large numbers. Now I'm talking hundreds of millions. They produce large numbers of sperms to travel through the oviduct. But for the female, the number of eggs is determined at birth. So the moment you're born, the amount of eggs you will carry throughout your life has already been calculated. And only one egg is released per month. This is because of the menstrual cycle. Now, both ovaries together produce about 500 mature eggs. And the eggs stop producing the moment a person reaches of age of 45 to 55. Although there could be never mind. So the number of eggs produced can only be one egg is only released every month. This is known as the menstrual cycle. It's part of the menstrual cycle, and 500 mature eggs are produced altogether. But the moment a lady hits 45 to 55, the amount of eggs stop producing. So let's go on to the let's practice of our first section. Now that we've finished section 17.1, here are some few questions that are asking you. To question 2, the figure shows a side view of the structures in the lower abdomen of a woman. Name the parts labeled A to H. And B, using the letters A to H, state where the sperm cells are deposited during the sexual intercourse, fertilization occurs, the fetus develops, and eggs are produced, and female sex hormones are produced. So let me quickly go back to this part and explain to you how fertilization and sexual intercourse occurs. Now, when the sperm cells arrive here, it travels through the oviduct to arrive at the ovary. From there, it penetrates the ovum, which is the female gamete, to produce a zygote. But before the zygote is produced, the ovum then travels through the uterus when it's fertilized, and fertilization occurs in the uterus. It becomes fertilized and produces a zygote. And then from there on, the child becomes produced. The unborn child starts to develop, and that is how the sexual intercourse happens. That's how it happens. Now let's move on to 17.2, which is puberty. In this section, we're going to describe the roles of the hormones that we've learned, which are testosterone and estrogen. And they explain the development and regulation of the secondary sexual characteristics that occur during puberty, and will also describe the menstrual cycle in females, and describe where the estrogen and the progesterone are produced in the menstrual cycle and in pregnancy, and explain the role of the follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, and the progesterone and estrogen in controlling the menstrual cycle and pregnancy. So what is puberty? A puberty is a stage of human growth and development when a person becomes physically mature. That means that when a person reaches of age, the body begins to become physically mature. That means the secondary sexual characteristics are produced. That is growth of hair in body parts, the increase in size of sexual organs, and the begin of the menstrual cycle, and so on. So in puberty, it normally arises at different age. Once a person probably for males and females, it could be from 13 all the way to 16 or 15. And for different, for it depend on whatever depending on the gender, different factors begin to show. Like for male, facial hair begins to grow. Hair under pubic regions and under armpits also begin to grow. That's why many men start growing hair on legs, hands, and armpits. For females, it's the same as for males, but they don't grow facial hair. They grow hair on the pubic regions and on the armpits. Now, the sexual organs, penis, testicles, breast, and uterus, they become bigger, they enlarge. And for male, the larynx enlarges and the voice becomes deeper. So they will go from a normal voice to a deeper voice. And for females, the hips become wider, they broaden. And for male, the production of sperm starts, and for female, the menstruation and ovulations begin. Now that we've learned the characteristics of puberty, during puberty, the body begins to change from that of a child to an adult, and the reproductive system of a young person begins to function. The sex organs mature and begin to produce gametes, allowing for the production of a zygote, and other changes also appear in the young person's body at this stage, which is known as the secondary sexual characteristics. And let's go to the menstrual cycle. For female, the first sign of puberty is usually due to monthly discharge of blood or menses from the uterus via the vagina. This is called menstruation. The menstrual period or time of menstruating usually lasts for about 5 days. However, the length of the menstrual period and the amount of blood loss can vary from female to female. So depending on the person, the amount of blood loss and the length of the days of the menstrual period depends on the person. A sign of the menstrual cycle is a cycle of events that takes place in the female reproductive organs every month. The average menstrual cycle is 28 days, but this can vary depending on the female. Menstruation, the average is for an adult female, but anyway. However, the menstrual cycle ranging from 21 to 23 days are not abnormal. That means for people who have more or less than 28 days, it's not abnormal. That is normal for normal people. It can be also considered normal for females. Thus, there is a natural variation in the length of the menstrual cycle. Stress, tiredness, and illness, and unbalanced diet or malnutrition may alter or stop the menstrual cycle and change interval between periods. As a female ages, the ovaries will eventually stop releasing eggs and the menstrual cycle will stop. This is called the menopause. The menopause usually takes place between 45 to 55 years of age. So when the lady becomes older, the ovaries will eventually stop releasing eggs, and the menstrual cycle will stop. And this stop is called the menopause, and it usually takes between the age of 45 to 55 years of age. So how does the change in follics? What are the changes in a follic during the menstrual cycle? Now, in the ovaries contain many developing follics. And in this diagram shows the changes that take place in one follicle during menstruation cycle. Other follicles at different stages of development but are not shown in this diagram. Now here in number 1, this is the primary follicle. The young follicles are called the primary follicles, and each primary follicle consists of a potential egg, which is an potential ovum surrounded by a layer of smaller cells known as follicle cells. Now, a primary follicle may develop into a Graafian follicle, which is the step number 2. The Graafian follicle contains an egg surrounded by the follicle cells, which is this. These are considered the follicle cells, and a fluid-filled space. So here is a fluid-filled space, and here's the egg cell. Now this primary follicle can arrive at a Graafian follicle. Now, ovulation. On day 14, which is or day 28 of it's a 28-day cycle, the Graafian follicle ruptures, which means it breaks down, and the egg is released into the oviduct through the funnel-like opening. The release of the egg from the ovary is called ovulation. Now, the corpus luteum, breaks down, and if no fertilization occurs, the corpus luteum will persist for some time, then eventually breaks down. Now, after ovulation, the Graham follicle develops into a corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum produces hormones that prepare for pregnancy. Now, it is when fertilization doesn't occur, the corpus luteum will eventually break down. This cycle of events that take place in the ovary is controlled by hormones. These hormones are secreted by the pituitary gland in the brain. And the follicles in the ovaries and corpus luteum in turn secrete hormones. In turn, they secrete hormones. And these hormones control the changes that take place in the uterus. And thus, the menstrual cycle is controlled by hormones. And here are stages of the menstrual cycle. There is different stages, and each day the menstrual cycle. In this section, we're going to learn the stage. Now, stage 1, the floaty. This is the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is located in the brain, and here you can see a diagram of the menstrual cycle, of how the menstrual cycle begins. Now, on day 1 of the menstruation, in the first day of the menstrual cycle, the uterine lining and adenoma breaks down, and it flows through the uterus out of the body through the vagina. That means the menstruation breaks down. And when it does break down, the pituitary gland secretes follicle-stimulating hormones into the bloodstream. Now, after 5 days or 6 days after the first stage, which is known as the menstruation, it is in the first stage that the blood flows out from the uterus, and the menstruation, as the female has hit her menstruation or her period. Now, after those days, the follicle stage, which is after like 5 to 6 or 7 a week approximately, the follicle stimulates the development of the follicles. The follicle stimulates the FSH. The FSH is a hormone that stimulates the development of follicles in the ovaries. The Graham follicle, which is a matured follicle, develops, and is the Graafian follicle that secretes the oestrogen into the bloodstream. Now, the oestrogen is a hormone created by the Graafian follicle. Now, from there we go to the second stage, which is the repair and the growth of the uterine lining. Now, when the Graafian follicle secretes oestrogen into the bloodstream, the uterus lining becomes thick and spongy with blood vessels. Yes, the uterine lining grows and thickens. It's the uterine lining that grows thick and spongy with blood vessels, and the oestrogen causes the repair and growth of the uterus lining. So remember when the first day, when the uterus lining was destroyed, breaks down because lack of fertilization. Here is when during the second day, which is the fertile period, the uterine lining grows and thickens, becoming spongy with blood vessels, and it's the estrogen that causes this repair and growth of the uterine lining. A high concentration of estrogen inhibits the FSH production. This prevents the maturation and development of more follicles. So to prevent the creation of other follicles like the Graafian follicles, it is the estrogen that inhibits the FSH production. And a high concentration of estrogen also stimulates the pituitary gland to secrete luteinizing hormone. This is around day 11 to day 15. Now, on day 14, the ovulation occurs, and the luteinizing hormone causes ovulation. The follic stimulating hormone was what caused stimulate the development of follicles, and it's the follicles what secreted the estrogen into the bloodstream, and it's the estrogen that causes the repair and growth of the uterine lining. Now, the luteinizing hormone is what causes ovulation. The egg is released from the Graafian follicle into the oviduct. Remember when we talked about the production of the egg? This is ovulation. And it's the luteinizing hormone that will causes this. The luteinizing hormone allows the egg to travel and makes the follicle cell denatured. Now, the egg is released from the Graafian follicle and into the oviduct. The remainder of the Graafian follicle develops into the corpus luteum, and development of the corpus luteum is caused by the luteinizing hormone. The corpus luteum is formed and is created by the luteinizing hormone, and it's the lutein is the pituitary gland that secretes the luteinizing hormone. And now, when the corpus luteum is produced, it secretes progesterone into the bloodstream. Now, in day 50 to day 58, the uterine lining thickens further and becomes well supplied with blood capillaries, preparing it for the implantation of the embryo. So, in day 15 or 28, the uterine lining thickens further and becomes richly supplied with blood capillaries. This prepares the uterine lining for implantation of the embryo. Thickening of the uterine lining in preparation for the implantation of the embryo is caused by progesterone. And this is what causes progesterone to inhibit the ovulation and the follicle stimulating hormone production. So then the uterine line becomes thicker, and the uterine line becomes thicker with blood cell capillaries, preparing it for the implantation of the embryo, or aka fertilization. And if no fertilization occurs, we will go back to menstruation. This is the destroying of these, destroying of the uterine lining, and blood spills out. Blood spills out of the uterus. So changes of menstrual cycle, as you can see in the diagram, estrogen is produced first, and progesterone is produced later on. And these diagrams shows the changes of hormones. Now, in the beginning, I explained and I said that during the beginning, it's the follicle stimulating hormone that produces the follicle, and it's the Graafian follicle that produces the estrogen. The estrogen is what causes the repairing of the uterine line as it becomes really thick. It starts to become thick. When the uterus damages, this is called menstruation. Now, when it gets damaged, it's the estrogen that helps the uterine lining to grow and become thicker. And with the help of progesterone, which is later produced, it becomes even more thicker. And if no fertilization occurs, it gets destroyed. And this section is called menstruation. And this entire process is repeated back from the beginning and so on later. This is the human menstrual cycle. So what happens if no fertilization occurs? The egg breaks down, the corpus luteum breaks down, and the blood progesterone level decreases. And on the 28th day, without progesterone, the uterine lining begins to break down and the menstruation begins again. And this whole cycle repeats. So what happens if fertilization occurs? The fertilization egg becomes a zygote. The zygote develops into an embryo. The embryo embeds itself in the uterine lining, and the embryo secretes a hormone that prevents the corpus luteum from breaking down until the structure called placenta is formed. The corpus luteum secretes progesterone and progesterone until the placenta is enabled to take over production. And this is the end of section 17.2 that studies 17.2 on the student's book and answer these questions: what are the effects of oestrogen and progesterone on uterine lining, and what is the fertile period, and what happens when the uterine lining during the first 5 days. Please pause this video and answer, as it will help you study for your exam. And let's move on to the last and final section of this topic, which is 17.3, fertilization and development, which is the fusion of the nuclei cell of the fusion of the nuclei of the male gamete and the female gamete, which is the sperm and the egg cell. And we're going to also learn about the functions of the umbilical cord, the placenta, and bonnet sac and employer field. We're also going to learn about pregnancy and how does the baby form and so on. Now here is mating or sexual intercourse. When a male's penis is placed inside a female vagina, this is known as mating or copulation or sexual intercourse. So when the male penis is entered the female's vagina, the sperm cell is secreted through the semen. Remember, the semen is a fluid which is the combination of the fluid created by the progestic gland and the sperm. And now the semen travels through the vagina, through the uterus and the ovaries, of arriving at the egg cell. Now it is the egg cell that is what the sperm come to. Now the sperm are only one sperm. Despite the fact that many sperms come, only one sperm enters the egg cell. Now, before the sperms enter the egg cell, they have to break the follic cells, which is the outer membrane, or the jelly coat. The sperm cells break the follic cells, and only one sperm cell nucleus enters the egg, and the follic cells disperse. And when the nucleus of the sperm cell combines with the nucleus of the female of the egg cell, the entire cell transforms into a zygote. Now, how does the embryo develop after fertilization? Now, in the ovary, as the sperm meets the egg in the oviduct, it forms a zygote. The follic cells are then transformed into embryo and arrive at the embryo implanted in the uterine lining of the uterus. And then from there, the cellular lining of the inner surface of the oviduct is sweeps the fertilized egg of the zygote along the oviduct. Yes, this is true. The egg cell and the sperm cell meet in the oviduct, and they form to a zygote. The zygote then divides to form a ball of cells called embryo. Sorry, this is not the follic cells. The zygote then separates itself to multiply, divides itself. Remember that transforms from 2 to 4 to, that is this zygote transforming into the embryo. And the energy needed for this early stage of the cell division is provided from the nutrients stored in the egg. A zygote divides by mitosis to form an embryo. You will learn about mitosis on chapter 18, which is our next video. Now, it takes about 5 days for the embryo to reach the uterus, and the embryo may float freely in the uterus up for about 2 days. Eventually, the embryo sinks in and becomes embedded into the uterine lining, and this is called implantation. Implantation usually occurs about 7 days after fertilization. Now, the development of the amniotic sac. The development of the placenta and the amniotic sac. Soon after implantation, figure-like projections called villi began to grow from the embryo into the uterine lining, and they contain blood capillaries of the embryo. And the villi and the uterine lining, this is the embryo villi, and here's the uterine lining. The villi and the uterine lining in the villi are embedded, make up the placenta. Thus, the placenta is formed partially by embryonic tissue and is formed by embryonic tissue and partly by the uterine lining. So the placenta is formed by the embryonic tissue and the uterine lining. A tube known as the umbilical cord attaches the embryo to the placenta. So this umbilical cord attaches the placenta to the fetus or the embryo. Now, the development of the let's move on. Now that we understand this, let's quickly move on to the functions of the amniotic sac. What are the functions of the placenta, umbilical cord, and amniotic sac? Now, the placenta allows oxygen and dissolved food substances it allows oxygen, dissolved food substances, and protective antibodies to diffuse from the mother's blood into the fetus blood, and it allows waste and excretory products to diffuse from the fetus blood to the mother's blood, produces estrogen and progesterone. The umbilical cord attaches the fetus to the placenta, and it contains the blood vessels of the fetus. It contains two umbilical arteries that transport deoxygenated blood and metabolic waste from the fetus to the placenta, and one umbilical vein that transports the oxygenated blood and the food substances from the placenta to the fetus. And now we talk about amniotic fluid. It supports the fetus before birth and protects the fetus against physical injury, allows the fetus a certain degree of movement, and lubricates and reduces friction in the vagina during birth. Now here's the fetal blood system. The fetal blood system is separated from the maternal blood system. In this diagram, it shows a section of the female uterus containing a fetus. The fetal blood capillaries are surrounded by maternal blood spaces, that is, blood spaces belonging to the mother. In the placenta, the blood capillaries of the fetus are separated from the mother's blood by only a thin layer of tissue. Diffusion of the dissolved substances can only occur across the layer tissue. However, pathogens and toxins may be present in the mother's bloodstream can pass across the placenta that affects the fetus. So why is the fetal blood system not continuous with the mother's blood system? Well, the fetal blood system is not continuous with the mother blood system because the two blood systems cannot be continuous, because the blood pressure of the mother's blood will kill the fetus, and it's much higher than the fetus. The mother's blood pressure is way much higher than the fetus blood pressure, and the blood group of the fetus may not be the same as the mother's. And if the fetus and the mother have different blood groups and two blood systems were allowed to mix, the antibodies in the mother's blood may cause the fetus blood cells to agglutinate, and this will be dangerous to both the mother and the fetus. This also prevents potential harmful substances or pathogens from entering the fetus blood. Now this explains why the fetus blood system is separated from the maternal blood system, because the blood may be different, and the blood pressure are also different. So this could damage, if they were to mix, it could damage the maternal blood the maternal blood, it could damage both the fetus and the mother. Let's move on to this one last chapter, the final section, which is sexually transmitted infection. So let's be quick and explain what is sexual transmitted infections. Some diseases may spread through the sexual intercourse. A disease spread or transmitted in this way is called sexually transmitted infection, which is STI. STI can result from irreversible physical damage. Now, STI can result in irreversible physical damages. An STI caused by bacteria or viruses. The bacteria or viruses are carried in the bloodstream of the infected person, and they may be transmitted to an uninfected person through the semen, where they contact the mucous membrane in the vagina, to the fluid in the vagina, where they come into contact with the mucous membrane of the urethra, and when an infected person gets into the bloodstream of an infected person. Now, here is an acquired immune deficiency syndrome, which is AIDS, or human immune deficiency virus, which is HIV. Is a virus pathogen that causes the most widely known sexual transmitted infection, STI. The AIDS. Signs of AIDS: chronic or persistent fever, severe diarrhea lasting for months, pneumonia, cancer of blood vessel, brain infection, and widespread tuberculosis. Now, AIDS is the most advanced stage of HIV virus infection. HIV destroys the body's immune system, and it's the system that protects a person from infection. Normally, when a foreign particle such as bacterial virus enters our bloodstream, our white blood cells, the lymphocytes, are able to identify them, and these lymphocytes either stimulate to protect the antibodies and destroy the bacteria and viruses. In this way, our immune system protects our bodies against many diseases. But the HIV destroys a person's immune system by destroying the lymphocytes. The body is unable to produce sufficient antibodies to protect the person and against other diseases, and therefore the infections are normally mild, may prove to be fatal to a person with AIDS. Something as simple as fever can kill a person with AIDS because of the lack of lymphocytes. So here are some signs and symptoms of AIDS, and these are what damages AIDS. Now, what are AIDS? AIDS are the modes of transmission. How do AIDS go from one person to another? Well, one is through sexual intercourse with an infected person, or sharing needles with an infected person. One thing people that do drugs tend to do is to share needles. But what they don't know, this is actually a very dangerous thing, as if someone were to be infected, the needle can act as a mode of transmission, and allow the person that was infected, share the disease with another person that is not infected, causing the people to acquire the AIDS or HIV. Now, another mode of transmission is blood transfusion with blood with another infected person, or during pregnancy, the virus may pass from the infected person to the fetus. That means if your mother were to have HIV and gets pregnant, there's a very high chance that the child or the fetus could have HIV. And what are the prevention or control? How do we prevent the ability of getting AIDS? One prevention is to keep one's sex partner or abstain from having sex. Males should wear a condom if they're not sure whether their partners or themselves are affected with HIV. Do not share instruments that are likely to break the skin and be contaminated with blood. And go to reliable operators if you require acupuncture treatment or ear piercing or tattooing. That means if you want to get earring or tattoo or ear piercing, you should go to a reliable people and not some second-hand cheap businesses that may cause the spreading of this disease. Now these are some questions for this section 73, 17.3 and 17.4. Please pause this video and try to answer them. State the functions of the umbilical cord, placenta, amniotic sac, and amniotic fluid. Name the pathogen that causes AIDS, which is HIV. And state one sign and one symptoms of AIDS, and state 2 ways by which HIV can be transmitted. And this is the end of this chapter 17, sexual reproduction in humans. I hope you understood this video. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we'll see you on to the next chapter, which is chapter 18 soon. Goodbye. Have a great day.